Well, hello everyone, and welcome to week 2 of Vibrance Hormone Bootcamp. And today I have the pleasure of introducing Steve Goldring, who is going to be talking to us about hormones and the effect of environmental toxins. So, Steve Goldring is a compounding pharmacist licensed in Colorado, Oregon, and Utah. His passion for patient education started in 2015 after counseling menopausal women at a mom and pop drugstore. Now, through his online programs, Steve helps patients of all ages achieve optimal hormonal balance. Drawing on insights from hundreds of healthcare providers, his Simple Hormones program addresses patient specific questions and concerns, relieves fears, and fosters understanding. Steve also holds certifications in advanced bioidentical hormone replacement therapy from WorldLink Medical, C4HRT specialist from Professional Compounding Centers of America, and a brain health coach from Amen Clinics. We're so happy to have Steve join us today. So thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Is this on? Testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
I guess it is on. Testing 1, 2, 3. I actually moonlight as a sound engineer for bands. And so I do that a lot. Testing 1, 2, 3. The title of my presentation today is Testing 1, 2, 3, Counting the Symptoms and Reading the Signs of the Looming Hormone Apocalypse. As Dr. Bruno said, I'm Steve Goldring, the hormone pharmacist. I help patients and healthcare practitioners with easy to understand patient education resources. Most of those resources are about hormones and hormone optimization, digital courses that help patients and healthcare providers in understanding hormones to a deeper level. I have a YouTube channel that has about 100 videos and 1 million views and 20,000 subscribers. I don't really have any relationships or financial relationships that I need to disclose at this time. I thought today it might be really fun for us to go to the movies together. Unfortunately, the screenplay of our race, the human race, kind of looks to me like it might be headed toward a bit of a tragic ending. And so we'll talk about that screenplay along the way. But I think we're going to be able to walk out of this theater with at least some hope that you and I can make a difference and help to save the day like Luke Skywalker did in Star Wars. So grab your large popcorn and maybe a drink of your choice, and let's get started. Have a sip myself. So today we're going to ask a couple of what I think are important questions. The first question I have for us is there poison in your shower? We're going to focus on 3 specific poisons or toxins. Those are called endocrine-disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. We've all heard about toxins, and maybe we've also heard that the whole idea of toxins is it's a bit exaggerated or overblown. But in this boot camp, we're going to take a look at the research and discover 7 serious ways that these particular toxins can disrupt our hormones. These 7 endocrine disruptions affect not only our own health, but also the health of our children and our grandchildren, whether we have those children yet or not. As well, they also affect the future of the entire human race. And if that sounds like hyperbole, just stick with me and we'll get to that. All is not lost, though. The good news is that our friends at Vibrant Wellness have developed several comprehensive tools that can help you and me as healthcare practitioners in testing our patients. We're going to go over about 5 of those most important tools that help you to get a better handle on those specific toxins, as well as on the hormones that they might be disrupting. The unfortunate reality of these toxins is that we aren't going to be able to completely eliminate them from our lives. It's just a fact. But that's okay, because we do have several practical strategies that can help us and our patients to greatly reduce our exposure and the toxic burden that we're having. As astronaut Jim Lovell announced, Houston, we have a problem. But the problem we're talking about today isn't just on the Apollo 13 lunar module. It's not isolated to Houston either. It affects New York and St. Louis and Fort Lauderdale and Chicago and Vancouver, BC, and LA, and even Salt Lake City, where my wife and I live. So I worked closely with a pharmacy technician named Mo over 20 years ago. I guess you could say Mo was a bit cynical. Mo's favorite saying that I must have heard 50 times in working a couple of years with Mo was, "Is there poison in your shower? News at 11." Well, clearly Mo was sort of making light of our tendency to sensationalize the dangers that were out there and in here. But I've been kind of asking that same question in a bit more earnest over the past few months. Is there really poison in your shower? Is there poison in my shower? Well, I've come to realize that the answer is probably yeah. There probably are maybe lots of poisons in our showers. But in order to not overwhelm you or me, I'm just going to focus on three specific poisons, toxins that are called endocrine-disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. This is a print advertisement for DuPont Chemical from somewhere around 1935. My calculation is that's about 90 years ago. Maybe you've heard the tagline that's buried in this ad that says, "Better living through chemistry." DuPont Chemical and Dow Chemical and some other chemical companies developed all kinds of chemicals in the mid 20th century that apparently made a lot of our lives easier and convenient, more convenient, cheaper. We could wrap stuff, even babies, in clear cellophane. I don't know what the purpose of that is, but we could mold a bright future in plastics. We quite literally entered the plastic age around 75 years ago. A minor character in the movie The Graduate from 1967 has just one word to impart to the impressionable young Benjamin Braddock. That word is plastics. Mr. McGuire's point was plastics are the future, but plastics are also the present. Right now, in your shower, you might just have one of these flexible, clear plastic shower curtain liners. I do. I have one in my shower. The flexibility of that shower curtain comes from something called phthalates. Phthalates are chemicals that are added to all sorts of plastic to make them kind of soft and pliable. The fresh smell that you get in your shower right after you put that shower curtain up comes from those phthalates. Because they smell fresh, they're added to personal care products like shampoo and conditioner. The ingredient list on shampoo and conditioner often lists fragrance, and the chances are pretty good that that fragrance includes some sort of phthalates. They help the scent last longer and stay more fresh. Body washes and soaps of all kinds contain fragrances, and most also have phthalates. So phthalates both smell nice and they make plastics soft. Here's a list of some of the most commonly used phthalates. I, of course, expect you to memorize this phthalate list and tell me the exact name and which carbon number has been substituted on the exam at the end of the presentation. The vast majority of our personal care products, like shampoo and conditioner and body wash and lotion, they're all contained, correct me if I'm wrong, in plastic containers. And those containers are often made with something called bisphenol A, or BPA. BPA is added to plastics to do sort of the opposite of what phthalates do. BPA helps make them stronger and more rigid. Well, we're becoming a little bit more aware of things like BPA in plastic bottles. In fact, this plastic bottle has a little label on the bottom that says BPA free. Maybe you've seen plastic water bottles like that. Unfortunately, a lot of plastic manufacturing companies have kind of taken out the BPA and maybe put in BPS or another bisphenol related chemical in its place. So it seems like those chemical companies are doing us a big favor by saying BPA free, but sometimes they're just playing a little bit of a shell game with chemical names that especially consumers might not really understand. Beyond plastics, BPA is also used as a liner for metal cans. That BPA liner helps make sure the cans don't leak. The same thing happens with so-called BPA-free cans as what happens with BPA-free bottles. They could just as easily contain BPS or BPF and be just as toxic. I walk out of Costco every week with a thermal printed paper receipt that they check at the door. Most of those thermal paper receipts are loaded with BPA. So I've started throwing my receipts out right after the lady at the door checks it. Here's a list of the most common bisphenols, including BPA and BPS and BPF and BPG and BFD. You kind of get the picture. You can memorize this list and expect it to show up on our exam at the end. DuPont Chemical, as I've mentioned in their ads, promised us better living through chemistry. In 1938, DuPont developed a thermoplastic polymer called polytetrafluoroethylene, or PTFE. Ultimately, PTFE was used to develop Teflon, which has become synonymous with non-stick cookware. And we've been living better lives ever since, right? Well, unfortunately, there's a long list of chemicals involved in the manufacture of products like Teflon. This is a list of just a few. They're called per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, abbreviated PFAS. So be sure to memorize this table and be prepared to recite it for me at the end. The 2019 film Dark Waters tells the true story of one of DuPont Chemical's own attorneys. His name was Robert Bilott. Bilott went from defending DuPont and other chemical companies to spearheading a class action lawsuit against DuPont. Bilott's suit alleged that DuPont had polluted entire towns in West Virginia with toxic PFAS and PTFE and all the byproducts of manufacturing Teflon, but also that DuPont covered up the danger from those chemicals. There's a dramatic moment in the film when attorney Bilott asks a company expert in open court, "What if you drank it?" Of course, he was referring to the toxic chemicals that DuPont was making. Spoiler alert, DuPont ultimately settled that class action lawsuit with over 3,500 people in these towns for $671 million. So what if we drank these chemicals? PFAS or PTFE or all these chemicals are called forever chemicals. That's because they tend to stick around in our bodies and in the environment for many years, maybe even decades. What if those PFAS were actually in our tap water? I suppose that would also mean that they could be in our shower water, but that's kind of unlikely or ridiculous or seems impossible. Well, this is a map that shows where samples of drinking water have been tested. The light blue circles on this map were pretty much over the limit. The dark blue circles are below the limit, but still present. So it's pretty clear that there are a lot of these forever chemicals in our drinking water pretty much everywhere. And because they're forever chemicals, they're pretty unlikely to go away anytime soon. So my wife and I live in a 1917 Craftsman bungalow in Salt Lake City. We have always wanted to live in a Craftsman, and we kind of fell in love with this home at first sight. The 107-year-old plumbing in our house, thankfully, we didn't have to do it, but it has been replaced before we moved in with plastic pipes called PEX. This is the plumbing manifold that's in our basement. It's in this room right across from me. It's kind of a do-it-yourself job from the previous owners, not the best plumbing, I guess. Unfortunately, I've seen at least 6 studies showing that plastic pipes, specifically PEX tubing, which is what we have in our house, is very likely to leach bisphenols, phthalates, and PFAS into our drinking and shower water. There's no way to get away from these toxic chemicals unless we maybe homestead out in the woods and get off the grid, grow our own organic food, and avoid personal care products and filter our own water. But haven't the so-called toxic effects of these chemicals maybe been a bit exaggerated? I mean, come on, how bad can it be? Well, let's answer that question in regard to what these 3 chemicals can do to us in general ways. All 3 of these toxins have been associated with serious effects on heart health. Bisphenol A and bisphenol S are associated with multiple cardiovascular risk factors: heart attack, arrhythmias, atherosclerosis, hypertension. BPA has been linked to increases in cognitive impairment. This is a systematic review of 22 studies. Maternal exposure to BPA raises the likelihood of neurodevelopmental dysfunction in the developing fetus. BPA binds to estrogen receptors, which we'll talk about later. It alters the expression of synaptic proteins, dysregulates thyroid, alters neurotransmitter levels. Higher urine BPA levels are associated with a significant increase in type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, effects on our metabolic state. This systemic review showed that exposure to PFAS is associated with elevated liver enzymes. Here's a hint, though, of where we're going to go next. As bad as all those toxins can be for our hearts, our brains, and our metabolism, what I want to focus on today, what I think is the most serious and maybe terrifying risk from these chemicals, is their impact on human reproduction. These three specific chemicals disrupt our hormones. That's why they're often referred to as endocrine-disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. I'd like to focus on 7 ways that these EDCs specifically affect human reproduction. Well, several of the most serious impacts of endocrine disruptors are a result of the way they act as imposters. Just like Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Catch Me If You Can, endocrine disruptors pretend to be something they're not. Bisphenol A and its analogs pretend to be endogenous estrogens. That means they can bind to both alpha and beta estrogen receptors. Estrogen imposters like BPA reduce aromatase enzymes in the CYP family, which actually leads to a reduction in estradiol levels. Estrogen imposters cause a drop in real estrogens. Phthalates, bisphenols, and PFAS can modulate CYP enzymes and impact stage 1 estrogen metabolism, which we'll talk about a little bit later. They can potentially lead to altered hormone levels and metabolic disruptions, which we've already mentioned. Estrogen imposters like BPA alter gene expression. They can result in the reduction of several key proteins and enzymes that are involved in estradiol production. BPA disrupts the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, changes the actions of LH, FSH, and GnRH. BPA induces apoptosis and autophagy in granulosa cells, and that can impair follicle growth. Ultimately, it can lead to premature ovarian failure or premature menopause. Those estrogen imposters also are implicated in endometriosis and uterine fibroids. I recently had a call with a dear friend of ours. She has endometriosis so severe that she's basically given up on the idea of having children, and she's actually considered getting a complete hysterectomy. She's 29 years old. That was simply heartbreaking to me. I talked with our friend about the possibility that EDCs might be contributing to her endometriosis. Bisphenols and other EDCs activate pro-inflammatory pathways. They can modify gene expression related to cell survival, apoptosis, and tissue remodeling in ways that promote endometrial progression beyond the lining of the uterus into places like the lungs or the bones or places where endometrial tissue really shouldn't be. Phthalate exposure has been associated with an increased risk of preterm birth, which can have long-term health consequences for those preemies who actually survive. Of course, the biggest risk for premature birth is that the baby is simply born too early to survive. This systematic review of nearly 100 studies supports the idea that phthalate exposure is associated with much higher odds of preterm birth in humans. In addition to increasing the risk for premature birth, EDCs like bisphenol can adversely affect fetal development, even leading to pregnancy loss. It also means lower birth length and lower birth weight in babies born to women exposed to bisphenols. In utero exposure to bisphenol and its analogs may affect children's cognitive functions in the long term. Bisphenol exposure can also negatively impact bone development before a baby is born. This is kind of a handy infographic from the review article that I was just talking about. It explains possible mechanisms that allow bisphenols, including BPA and others, to adversely affect a baby's health. So it mentions things like disrupting signaling activity of estrogen, progesterone, and thyroid, altering placental cell proliferation, dysregulating gene expression, promoting the progression of inflammation and oxidative damage. That's about the endometriosis problem, promoting dysfunction in the immune system. All three of those endocrine disrupting chemicals we've been talking about have the ability to affect the health of a woman and her developing baby. But what about the impact of EDCs on men? Well, as you know, testosterone is the key hormone in males, beginning very early in fetal development. The fetal testicle starts secreting testosterone in the first few weeks of the first trimester. As you may recall, the genitals of genetic males and genetic females are essentially identical early in development. Once those male testicles start secreting testosterone, though, the male genitalia starts to differentiate from the female. And one major aspect of that differentiation is the separation of the male genitals, which move further away from the anus. The distance between the genitals and the anus is a well-documented measurement called the anogenital distance, or AGD. The AGD is consistently much longer in males than in females, sometimes as much as twice as long. AGD has also been used as a surrogate marker for masculinization of the male fetus. You can't really measure this directly, but you can measure it in terms of the physiological difference, or the anatomical difference, I should say. How much testosterone that fetus has been exposed to is reflected in the AGD. Some groundbreaking studies have documented a strong correlation between prenatal phthalate exposure and a shorter AGD. These studies have been replicated and validated. There's even something called phthalate syndrome that was first recognized in rats, but it's also been seen in humans. Phthalates act as testosterone imposters, once again, like Leonardo, pretending to be testosterone. Phthalate exposure early in development seems to fool those fetal testicles into thinking, there's plenty of testosterone around, you don't need to supply any. And that leads to low actual testosterone and under-masculinization of the genetically male fetus. Ultimately, this means a shorter AGD, often undescended testicles or cryptorchidism, reduced testosterone secretion, both in utero, but also as an adolescent and an adult, and higher risks for testicular cancer in that adult, so 20 plus years later. The impact of phthalate exposure, especially if it happens at just the right window in development, like early in the first 12 weeks or so, can be devastating for the developing male fetus and his testicles. Unfortunately, the main purpose of testicles is sperm production. Phthalate exposure can also reduce his sperm count, possibly for the rest of his life. Coincidentally, or maybe not, sperm counts and sperm quality are actually on a downward slide across the entire population, across the entire world. An article from 1992 sounded an alarm that sperm count has been declining dramatically between 1938 and 1991, based on 61 studies of 14,947 men. Environmental and reproductive epidemiologist Dr. Shauna Swan and her team of researchers looked at all 61 of those studies and many more, and they published a couple of meta-analyses culminating in this one from 2023. Essentially, Dr. Swan and her colleagues stated that sperm counts between 73 and 2011 or so dropped 50%, about 1% per year over those years. So it's pretty astounding that there's basically half as many sperm available to fertilize human eggs in the whole world. Think about that for just a second. The same research team kind of reevaluated that declining sperm count, and they discovered that the decline actually got faster later on. While the decline in sperm count had been dropping about 1%, it was actually 1.16% per year between 1973 and 2011. The rate of sperm count decline increased to 2.64%, more than double per year between 2000 and 2021. Along with those alarming declines in sperm counts and sperm quality is another dramatic decline, and that is the decline in testosterone levels in men over the past 50 years or so. A man in his 30s today now has about the same testosterone level as a man in his 60s had a few days ago, or a few decades ago, not days, decades. Low testosterone contributes to factors that decrease fertility, like a low sperm count, erectile dysfunction, low libido. So we've talked about ovarian dysfunction, endometriosis, fibroids, premature birth, pregnancy loss, testicular dysfunction, low sperm count, low testosterone. All of these are contributing to the loss of fertility in our modern world. The World Health Organization is estimating that infertility affects about 1 in 6 people. It seems to be getting worse. The Pew Research Center shows that US births via assisted reproductive technology have basically quadrupled between 1996 and 2016. People can't seem to have babies the old-fashioned way. This graph demonstrates the declining global fertility rate. Note there's a black line here in the middle. That's the replacement level, which is about 2.1 babies per woman. Now, if my wife and I had 2 children, we are replacing ourselves, right? There's me and her. And when we die, those 2 children would be left behind. We actually only had 1. So we didn't do our job. But if our one or both of those children happen to pass away before they're able to have children, we need to have a little buffer. So that's why the replacement rate is actually 2.1. We need to have a little bit above 2. If you look at this orange line, the orange line is the global fertility rate. It's just now in 2024 crossing below the replacement threshold. There are only 2 areas of the world, I think it's North Africa and the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa, that are above the replacement level at this point in time. Otherwise, the fertility rate is below replacement in the whole world. The United Nations has published several predictions of where that fertility rate might go in the next 75 years. No matter how you slice it, though, even the most generous estimates are not looking all that good. This is a graph of Asian economies and the plummeting fertility rates in all of them. They're all well below that replacement level of 2.1 children per woman, and they have been since 1995 or so. That's nearly 20 years. 20 years of infertility have left society on the brink of collapse, with just one pregnant woman whose baby is the hope for humanity. Well, that's the premise of a 2006 film, Children of Men, which portrays a post-apocalyptic world in the year 2027. That's 3 years from now. Kind of prescient, possibly. Here's what the fertility rate looks like in Italy between 1850 and 2020. So 170 years ago, each woman in Italy had 5 to 6 children. Italy has been well below the 2.1 child per woman replacement rate since about 1980. Did you know that there are around 6,000 ghost towns in Italy? Dozens of small Italian towns and villages are shrinking to the point of disappearing. And the Italian government is paying foreigners to come and take up residence just to pay taxes and try to keep those towns afloat before they become ghost towns. Spain, Switzerland, Greece, Portugal, a bunch of other countries are offering similar incentives for foreigners to come in as new residents. Here's another graph of the fertility rate in Japan. Since 2005, the population of Japan has been shrinking dramatically. In many areas of Japan, there are so few school-age children that schools are closing their doors forever in unprecedented rates. This is a picture of the last two students graduating from Yumoto Junior High in Tene, Fukushima Prefecture, Japan, right before the schools shut down completely. Foreigners can buy a lovely home in many areas of Japan for $25,000 US, maybe less, sometimes even free. The Japanese population is projected to decline 50% in the next 75 years from 123 million to 63 million, and the Japanese economy is shrinking at an alarming rate. South Korea, which has the lowest birth rate in the developed world, has started seeing companies offer $75,000 bonuses for employee couples who have a baby. Well, here's what we know about the three specific endocrine disrupting chemicals we've talked about today. This is an article entitled Endocrine Disrupting Chemicals Implications for Human Health. And it kind of puts the problem pretty succinctly, connecting those two problems. First, it says evidence is particularly strong for relations between PFAS and reduced birth rate, reduced semen quality, PCOS, endometriosis. Second, evidence also exists for a relationship between bisphenols, BPA, and reduced semen quality, PCOS. Third, it mentions a relationship between phthalates and premature birth, reduced AGD in boys, and reduced semen quality. So we've discovered that there's solid scientific evidence that at least 7 pretty serious consequences can come from exposure to all 3 of those endocrine disrupting chemicals. I guess you possibly could come back to me and say the plummeting birth rate and worldwide infertility and the dropping sperm counts is due to some sort of genetic mutation or some kind of genetic problem. The only difficulty is that it's happening way too fast to be rooted in genetics. A genetic source of these problems would probably take hundreds of generations and maybe thousands of years. We're talking about huge, dramatic, catastrophic changes in 50 years or less, maybe 2-3 generations. It's plausible that other environmental factors, maybe air pollution or water pollution or other chemical contaminations, those might also contribute to these problems. Maybe things like lifestyle causes, smoking or alcohol abuse. One of the lifestyle causes that could easily be a plausible culprit is obesity and the standard American diet. Those are certainly suspect. We could also look at sociology. Are there societal trends that have a profound impact on birth rates? People getting married later or not at all? Couples choosing not to have children at all? Absolutely. Although these factors don't affect fertility rates specifically, they can definitely affect birth rate. Maybe we're just coming into a perfect storm. What's the primary driver of that storm? Well, the evidence may be circumstantial, but it's also somewhat compelling. The decrease in birth rate and fertility isn't just in humans, though. Litter sizes in domestic dogs and cats are declining at an alarming rate. Sperm counts are also going down in pets. If you think about it, our pets, they live with us. They're exposed to most of the same chemicals that we are, with some exceptions. They don't use very many personal care products or shampoo. I give my dog a bath once every 6 months or so. So they don't use nearly as much of those. They don't smoke and they don't drink. All 3 of the endocrine disrupting chemicals that we're concerned about have been found by testing bodily fluids in both cats and dogs. PFAS in serum, bisphenols in urine and hair, phthalates in urine and feces. Who killed the world? That's a quote from the splendid Angarad. She's one of 5 fertile women in a dystopian fertility-themed film called Mad Max, Fury Road. I think we can make a pretty strong case that it just might have been us who killed the world. And the murder weapon could very well be our own insatiable lust for the convenience and the low cost that come from plastics and that better living through chemistry. Well, our film has taken a turn for the worst. In the storytelling world, we could look at this as the all is lost moment. The hero of our story, the human race, looks to be in danger of, well, extinction. But what can we possibly do in light of this terrifying situation? Well, there are some ways that you and I can help to at least hold back some of that rising tide of toxic chemicals. The first thing we can do is to test. Knowledge is power. So let's go over 5 testing strategies that can help you and me as healthcare practitioners to gain back some knowledge and get a better handle on exactly what's going on with our patients in terms of both endocrine disrupting chemicals and hormones, as well as hormone metabolism. Of course, our friends at Vibrant Wellness have a toolbox that's just chock full of tools that can help us figure out where specifically we need to focus our attention. So I'd like to highlight just a few of those tools. The National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, NHANES 1999 to 2000, found detectable levels of several phthalate metabolites in over 75% of urine samples from the US population. The exposure to PFAS in the US, we've already talked about tap water, but this is actual urine samples, actual people. The exposure is pretty widespread. Vibrant Wellness offers an environmental toxins panel. Vibrant helps you test your patients for several important toxic chemicals, including phthalates, pesticides like glyphosate, and many others. Of course, phthalates are a crucial part of the environmental toxins panel, along with heavy metals, parabens, and a long list of other environmental toxins. BPA has been found in human urine. It's not as much in urine as it is in blood since it's rapidly metabolized. This is an example of a German study that basically every child studied had BPA in their urine. Vibrant's environmental toxins test wouldn't be complete without testing for phenols like bisphenol A or BPA. That's one of the major villains in our story. PFAS are most commonly found in blood, but they also appear in urine and cerebrospinal fluid since PFAS can cross the blood-brain barrier. And of course, Vibrant Wellness has us covered there. They offer PFAS urine testing as sort of an add-on to the environmental toxins panel. Their PFAS test includes a couple dozen different PFAS compounds. So we have testing panels that cover all the toxins that we're concerned about: phthalates, PFAS, bisphenols, all those endocrine disruptors that are a threat to our very existence as a species. Because these toxins are all endocrine disruptors, we're going to need to test our hormones as well. Vibrant offers comprehensive testing in serum, saliva, and urine for full panels of both male and female sex hormones. So it doesn't matter whether you as a practitioner prefer to test blood, saliva, or urine. Vibrant offers all of them, and there are advantages and disadvantages to each. Vibrant Wellness urine testing, though, also includes a full list of urine hormone metabolites. Things like estradiol metabolites are especially important when we consider the impact of EDCs, primarily through the disruption of, say, aromatase activity that can have profound effects on estradiol levels. You might be wondering, as you're looking at a particular patient, which pathway your patient's estradiol is going down. Is her estradiol being converted into 16-hydroxyestrone or 4-hydroxyestrone or 2-hydroxyestrone? The EDCs can have a dramatic effect, especially in that stage 1 metabolism that's on the kind of the left side of this urine hormone metabolite testing report. They especially have a lot of activity through the CYP enzymes that I've already mentioned, like CYP1A, which is listed right here. Dr. Kim Bruno, who's on the call here today from Vibrant Wellness, did a walkthrough of hormone metabolites on the previous boot camp, and I'd encourage you to watch that. I just watched it yesterday, and that was very helpful to really get her perspective on it. This is kind of a whole rabbit hole that we could easily fall into, like the rabbit from Alice in Wonderland. I'm here, my company is called Simple Hormones, and I'm here to simplify a admittedly complex topic, and that is hormones as much as I can. It's not completely simplifiable, but I try. I haven't yet tried to explain hormone metabolism to patients because I'm not sure that I understand that topic completely myself. But the clinical consultants at Vibrant Wellness can help you and me to untangle all those complexities of hormone metabolism for your practice and for your patients. Dr. Bruno reminded me that the clinical consultants are specifically there to help kind of hold our hands and walk us through those complicated reports when we test our patients for urine hormone metabolites to kind of help us understand what's going on with a particular patient. So a very valuable addition to their testing services. In light of all we've talked about today, it's tempting to lose hope, maybe get just discouraged. Are we willing to give up the convenience of plastics? Are we willing to pay the cost to remove bisphenols, phthalates, and PFAS from our homes and our lives? Well, I guess one of the things that you and I can do is we can run. Well, we can run, but maybe we can't hide. It's really impossible in our plastic and chemical saturated world to eliminate phthalates, bisphenol, or PFAS. We can at least begin to minimize our exposure to those endocrine disrupting chemicals. The simplest first step is by focusing on fresh organic whole foods that don't come in a plastic package. Just think about all those foods you buy that are wrapped in flexible plastic. You're not going to be able to eliminate those, but phthalates are everywhere in those packages. Eating more non-packaged whole foods could be a good start, though, toward reducing that toxic burden. My wife and I are taking a really close look at our cookware. My mom has a bunch of ancient Teflon pans. They've got to be 40 years old. Some of them she bought at a garage sale. They're all gouged and scratched up from using metal utensils on them. My son and I visited Grandma and Grandpa in their home a few months ago, and Grandma made scrambled eggs for my son, and he was convinced that he had eaten a lifetime worth of Teflon in one breakfast. And I can't say anything to her. Stainless steel, cast iron, ceramic coated cookware, all of those can reduce our PFAS exposure. My wife and I have been using an air fryer a lot over the past year or so. Our son gave it to us, but it has a coating, like a nonstick coating, and I kind of don't want to know what's in it. I'm not too sure about it. It's hard to get away from this stuff. Trust but verify when it comes to bisphenol A and related chemical toxins. Lots of products say non-BPA can liner, but many of the manufacturers simply substitute, as I mentioned, less well-known toxins like BPS. Speaking of BPA, my wife has a part-time job in a retail kitchen shop. She's handling those thermal printed receipts all day long. Just throw them out, wash your hands after you touch them, request a digital receipt, or say no thanks, I don't need a receipt. Read those labels carefully. I just started using this phthalate-free shaving cream. It says on there, paraben-free, phthalate-free, hypoallergenic, et cetera, et cetera. It's a little bit more expensive. It's taken me some time to get used to, but seems to work fine. Here's a new Dawn dishwashing detergent I found that explicitly states 0% phthalates. Here's a body wash I've been buying that doesn't have any parabens, dyes, or phthalates, no synthetic fragrance. Those are all good. Something we don't really think about much is off-gassing from things like floor coverings. My wife and I were in Lowe's a few days ago. She was looking at area rugs. All of them have some sort of stain-resistant coating. Those are all made with PFAS, and the same goes for vinyl plank flooring. There's a lot of off-gassing that happens with those floor coverings. Hard to get away from. Water-resistant fabrics used in outdoor jackets and other types of clothing also tend to be made with PFAS and related chemicals. I've been shopping for cycling gear and thinking about maybe I should get a jacket. I'm like, oh, I hope it doesn't have PFAS in it. It's sometimes a little non-transparent whether they do or not. Here's a simple one. Some friends were house sitting a couple of years ago at our house. They noticed these plastic storage containers that we use pretty much every single day. They wanted to give us a little kind of gift. So when we came home, they had gone out to Sam's Club and bought us basically the same set of containers, but these were in glass, or I don't know, maybe they're Pyrex or something. We've put all the plastic ones in this box. Very thoughtful gift, and it probably wasn't too expensive. If you do decide to hang on to those plastic storage containers, at the very least, keep them out of the microwave. It's so tempting to just take that leftover lasagna in this plastic container right out of the fridge and stick it straight into the microwave and turn it on. But heating plastics in the microwave multiplies those BPAs and phthalates that go straight into your food. So just be careful about heating up plastics in the microwave. We've ditched plastic cutting boards like this one in favor of wood. If you think about it, every cut on a plastic cutting board with either a sharp or even a dull knife puts microplastic into your food, into the water supply. Switching to wood is easy and it's not all that expensive. Just be sure to wash those wood cutting boards with soap and water and dry them immediately after you wash them. We've replaced several of them, and now we have a whole stock of relatively not expensive wood cutting boards. So let's just take a page from George Bailey's book. If we consciously decide to get rid of as many plastics as we can, we'll be reducing our toxin load. We haven't done this yet, but we're looking at some options. We rely on filtered water that goes through our refrigerator ice maker. This is stainless steel, by the way. I plan to invest in a reverse osmosis filter that gets rid of most of the bisphenols, phthalates, and even PFAS from our drinking and cooking water. Seems like a project that costs a couple $100, and maybe I could do it myself. Should be worth it for the peace of mind. I've also been checking out something called the EWG Environmental Working Group. They have an iPhone and Android app that you can use and scan barcodes while you're in the store. It's not perfect, but it's at least a start. It's helpful. As I mentioned at the beginning, we can walk out of the theater with some hope. That hope isn't in the empire. And by empire, I mean government or chemical manufacturers. They've been maybe pretty slow to take action. It's not so clear the empire cares more about our health and safety than they do about corporate profits. Every few days, somebody comes into my wife's store, Spoons and Spice, asking Mary about wood cutting boards or silicone utensils or stainless steel pans. They've made the decision to take action for their own health and safety, but also for the long-term health of their children and their grandchildren. The future of humanity depends on us to start making a difference and making our voice heard. That hope lies with you and with me. Well, I've compiled a few resources for further information on my website. You can get those by using this link, simplehormones.com/vibrant. Just some references and those kind of things. But it looks like we're out of time and it's time for some questions. So, Dr. Bruno, I think you're up. Oh, there she is.
Sorry, the tech was a little funny there. Sorry about that.
We always have tech
Hi,
problems.
everyone. That was great. Thank you so much. I liked how you gave us some solutions at the end. Cause I'm not gonna lie, Steve, I was feeling a little apocalyptic. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Very good. Very good. So we do have a couple questions, also just a couple comments. So I'll bring those over. I'm going to start kind of at the bottom. I do want to bring this out. I actually just saw this on Instagram yesterday, the air fryer without the non-stick. So this our place. Have you heard of this one, Steve?
I haven't.
So I guess I didn't even think about the air fryer with non-stick until I saw this, and I said, well, it completely makes sense, right? Because you just that's why it's not sticking to that pan that's in
Right.
there. Just so everybody knows, this was brand new to me yesterday. I had no idea. It looks super cool. It doesn't have any of the non-stick, so it's kind of a toxin-free air fryer. And apparently there's a Labor Day sale. So, there you go.
Sounds good. This is one of the examples, though. Our air fryer, it's like, this is a process. The process is, okay, evaluating where are these toxic chemicals coming from and how can I start eliminating them? you're not going to eliminate them completely, but how can I start reducing our toxic load? And
Yeah.
so and the air fryer might be our next thing, or maybe the filtering the water, or I don't know what's next.
Right, right. I know. I mean, we all have to live on planet Earth, unfortunately. So we just got to do step by step by step. So, but thank you for the reminder on the air fryer. That was definitely a new thing to me. So Lucy has a question. How long does it take to get rid of these types of toxins?
That's an interesting question, and that varies depending on which toxin you're talking about. So when we're talking about PFAS, it takes a very long time, and those can stick around in your body for quite a long time. But things like BPA and phthalates may be a lot more water soluble, and they may actually be able to be eliminated fairly quickly. Once you start taking the steps to avoid exposure to those chemicals. So it depends. The answer is it depends on which specific chemical we're talking about. The PFAS is one that's more deeply concerning because it's so difficult to metabolize and get rid of. To be honest, I haven't gone into all the details of metabolizing and elimination of these particular chemicals, but I do know that BPS and phthalates are easier, and
Very good.
PFAS takes a lot longer.
Wonderful. And I will point all of you to the interpretive guides for both the PFAs and the environmental toxin guide. It breaks down each either toxin or PFA and what its best detox slash excretion pathway is per analyte, and then gives tools to be able to one, know where it's coming from so you know what to eliminate, and then also how to get it out of the system. So there's those two guides that are in your provider portal, and those are really great resources.
That is a resource that I haven't taken a look at, but I'd love to now that you mention it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Because I mean, it's impossible for us to remember all the different ways. Like this one's the best through here or there, with this binder or that binder. So definitely a nice desk resource there. We do have a question about kind of suggestions for best shower or water filters.
That's an area that I have, as I mentioned in the presentation, I have just started looking into. So I don't necessarily have any brands or the idea, though, at least what I've come up with so far, is most people recommend a reverse osmosis filter. Now, I'm not sure if you end up with, it's not the same as a distilled water. I think there might be some type of maintaining or adding back minerals, because when you have distilled water, it has no minerals in it, probably tastes terrible. It's probably not that good for you. So I don't know the details about that. I'm still doing some research on that, but I think the idea is reverse osmosis filters. Those are often put underneath your sink in the kitchen, which is the primary place. So that's not necessarily filtering my shower water. So that's maybe an additional step. So you start to imagine this type of scenario, and it starts to get more expensive. I can see the dollar signs coming in for something like that.
Yeah.
But that's a really good question.
Yeah, it is a great question. And one we do often get, and I actually, at the clinical team, we do have a list of some water filter resources that I will compile and get to Adair for when she sends out the slides. I just don't have access to it now. I don't think it's in the provider portal, but I know it's something that is talked about during clinical consults. And then shower filters, there's one called the Jolie, which has really, really good reviews, and you literally install it just like a shower head. So you don't have to redo with plumbing or anything like that. It's a shower filter that you can put right there. They also have one for your bathroom sink. So like when you're washing your face, brushing your teeth, that type of thing. So that's the one that I've seen the best reviews on for kind of bathroom filters. And yes, reverse osmosis, I think, is a great option for drinking water. You got to add back some minerals in that situation.
The shower filter idea is a great idea. I didn't even think of the fact that you could just put it right either underneath your shower head or instead of a shower head. That's a brilliant idea. Probably costs way less than filtering.
Yeah, and it's like it takes. I mean, I'm not very handy, and it's like it takes a minute to put on there.
Right.
I could switch it out. I didn't have to call a handyman. Okay, so switching gears just a little bit. One of question that we have: how many days do you stop progesterone when treating a postmenopausal woman with hormone replacement therapy?
Okay, so I have providers that have varying approaches to this. Um, probably the vast majority of the providers I work with do not stop progesterone at all. They just continuously give it because progesterone only helps you with symptoms while you're taking it. And so probably the primary symptom that progesterone helps with is insomnia. And in general, women like to sleep every single night, if at all possible, all the way through the night, if at all possible. And so when you do stop, and I do know some providers who stop and they have like a cyclic progesterone plan or protocol, but what happens is those women sleep a lot more poorly during the time while they're off of progesterone. So there are pluses and minuses, but in general, the vast majority of the providers I work with do a continual progesterone. Now, when they do stop progesterone, it would probably be for about 10 days. And the idea is to kind of mimic the way the normal menstrual cycle would work, where your progesterone is fairly high throughout the month and then kind of drops off toward the last half of the cycle. There are varying ways of doing it, but as I say, the majority of providers I work with don't, in postmenopausal women, stop the progesterone because it's too beneficial for them and they don't want them to not have those benefits. You also can get, if you stop progesterone, you can get breakthrough bleeding. And if you adjust the doses in the right way or the wrong way, you can actually have like regular menstrual cycles, which for many postmenopausal women is kind of a deal breaker. I mean, the only thing they like about being in menopause is not having periods. And so that can be an issue, but it's a practice that some providers will use.
Very good. Thank you for that. Okay, so talking about binders when eliminating toxins, direct binders for PFAs. Um, I'll start real quick. Use those guides again. I think those are really helpful. With PFAs, this is a fairly new kind of part of environmental medicine, as far as being able to test and look at it. They're called the forever chemicals for a reason because they are really hard to break down. And so there's maybe not direct binders, but there is information about how to, even just like keeping your fiber content up can help things not assimilate into the body, right? At least pass through, in the sense that it's not going to become a bioaccumulation issue. And then I'll hand it over to Steve if he has any additional, if you know of specific binders or specific things for any of the chemicals you talked about today.
I haven't really delved all that deeply into the treatments or the ways to eliminate those chemicals from your system. I'm really interested in pursuing that a little bit further. I'm mostly interested in prevention in this situation where we're preventing those from getting into our system in the first place. But this is absolutely an area that I need to pursue some further information. I'd love to take a look at the resources that Vibrant has available to kind of look more at that. That makes a lot of sense. It's not something that I've really pursued all that much yet.
Very good. Okay. And then the last question that we'll have time for today: recommending testing for retesting.
What I'm thinking about with retesting is what you'll probably want to do is take a look at kind of a baseline. You also want to take a look at, okay, is a patient or yourself, have you taken any steps to stop those toxins from getting in your system? And maybe kind of look at that as a line. Let's test either before or right after you've made some changes, and then give it some time, maybe a couple of months, and see if there's a difference. It's probably going to take a while for the results of that, whatever behaviors you've changed or whatever changes you've made in your house or your kitchen or your cookware. Those changes are going to take a while to propagate, especially things like filtration. You're going to drink contaminated water for a little while, and then eventually it's going to be clean. So it's probably going to be a couple of months.
Yeah.
I don't know if Vibrant has any specific recommendations about like the timing of testing, but what do you think, Dr. Bruno?
Yeah, I would 100% agree. It comes down to patient compliance.
Mhm.
Have they eliminated, right? Have we identified, we have our baseline, we have our one data point. Have they taken actionable steps? Have they worked to eliminate, change their water, decrease their plastics, whatever it is of the toxin that we are really concerned about? If we go over the sources with them, they need to have made some actionable steps. And we have a elimination process on board based on what we talked about in the guides. So they have gone through some sort of, drainage and upregulation of detox pathways and binding type situation. I usually will wait until my patients, some of the main complaints that they have had, maybe calm down, subside. I feel like we're at a good point before I would retest, which usually takes at least 3 to 4 months.
Mhm.
And that being said, just remember that if you test in the middle of a detox, your values might be higher because we are testing urine, which is what your body's excreting. So if you go in there and you start kind of shaking the apple tree and you are trying to pulling things out of the tissues to get them to eliminate it, and you test at 30 days, you might see some increase, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It means we're excreting it, we're getting it out. So I think we just need to be able to look at it clinically and decide how is it correlating with their symptoms? How is it correlating with how compliant they're being with the program that we're on, with the tools that we're using, and then make a call from that sense.
Right. And of course, there's also the elephant in the room is always the cost of the test, right? And we're not going to do 19 tests.
Right.
They're going to be, maybe 2, or, you're not going to be able to test multiple times on every patient because cost is always an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It is. All right. I know this is a quick one, so I know that was our last question, but this will be our last one. Do IUDs have plastic components?
I'm not really familiar with them, but just the pictures that I've seen of IUDs and my light familiarity with IUDs says, yeah, they probably do. But the truth is, almost everything we touch has some type of plastic components. You probably have 1,000 pieces of plastic in the room where you are right now, and probably on your body you have a polyester, or you have all kinds of plastic related materials. So we just can't get away from them. And definitely medical products and health products are loaded with plastics, and they probably have phthalates and BPA and maybe even PFAS in
Mhm.
them. That's just the way it is. We can't get away from them entirely.
Yeah. I think it becomes a benefit versus risk situation for the woman in that situation or for the patient. I had a personal situation where my BPA was extremely high and I was shocked about it because I use glass and, I don't touch receipts and all that stuff. And it ended up being the night guard that I was using
Mm.
because of my TMJ. So, patients who have sleep apnea machines, like they need the sleep apnea machine, they need the CPAP machine. But we might need to put them on some additional, more daily binders to deal with, what that presentation. So I think that, risk versus benefit, yes, everything's going to have content, like the contacts I'm wearing right now are plastic, right? So, I mean, we got to weigh it all out.
Yeah.
So,
This is a difficult situation that we're all in, and we're going to do the best we can. It's not going to be perfectly clean.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I see a couple more questions. They want to kind of dive further into those endocrine disrupting, into more prevention and treatment. So maybe, Steve, we can have you back for a clinical webinar and we can kind of
Sure.
dive more further into that. So I think that this is a great topic we all need to continue to learn on. And Steve, we're so happy that you were able to present with us today and join us today. Everyone have a great day, and we'll see you next week with Dr. Stills.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.